Hello everyone and welcome to the 3D lighting in Gdevelop part 1 tutorial. In this video I'll be showing you how to make 3D lighting in native Gdevelop. This is only part 1 of the series. Part 2 will be using Pandaco's extension, which also has, in my opinion, has superior lighting to the native Gdevelop lighting right now and is much more specific. But in part 1 we're going to deal with native Gdevelop lighting. Now, as you know, 3D objects are much different from the 2D objects in Gdevelop. 2D objects already have, it's very easy to make lighting and effects for them because that's how the engine was originally made, off of 2D objects. But 3D objects do not work the same as 2D objects. You cannot use the same effects. Now, the first thing we need to do to test out this lighting is make some objects and make a few camera controls so we can look around. But let's start by making some objects first. Now, the first object we're going to make is just a 3D object. Make sure all of these are 3D objects and not 2D objects. 2D objects will not respond to 3D effects, which we're going to use later. Now, we're going to make a 3D box. We're just going to call this red. We're just going to, might as well call it red. And we're going to choose a file for the image, and we're going to go to my pictures. I'm going to go to my game sprites, and I'm going to go to my tutorial sprites. And we're going to go to our red cube. If you don't have this, of course, which you won't have it, of course, you can just go to Piscal and easily create a red cube, but I already have this ready. We really don't have to show every face because you're only going to see the front face. So we're going to just put red cube for all of these anyway because we're going to be moving around the camera. But let's just make it so everything is red. And we're going to hit apply and drag this onto the scene. And as you can see from when I drag it on, you can tell it has different sides by the way when I drag it. So this just confirms that it is in fact a 3D object. Now we're going to drag this onto the scene. I'm also going to make some ground. And we're going to do this very quickly, make another 3D box. And we're going to name this object ground. Now the ground, we're going to have this as a green cube. A green ground. And we're also going to make sure all the faces are showing, just in case, and it doesn't look bad. So we're going to put green ground in all of these, and to make sure we can see all sides of it. And last but not least, after we do this ground, which we have now, we're going to drag onto the scene, and we're going to stretch it out so it can be more like a ground. Going to stretch it out, and I'm going to make its depth we're going to make its depth like 1,000, and then put it back by like -500, and this should give us a good ground effect. Now, last but not least, we're going to just add objects that you can also look at that are different colors, so we're not just looking at two objects. We can see how light reacts to different colors. Now we're going to add a new 3D object, and we're going to just call this block. And these are just going to be a regular blue block. Once again, I already have these pre-made. You could just go to Piscal and easily color a cube blue, and you'll have this. So we're going to insert a blue cube here. We're going to show all faces and insert the blue cube in all of the spots. And let's see how this is. Now we have blue cubes and blue blocks. We're going to put these on different Z orders as well. So we're going to make sure this is close to the ground. And it's kind of hard to tell exactly where it is, but you can kind of get the point of whether it's on the ground or not. So we're going to zoom out, and we're going to look at this. We're going to make sure it goes back in the Z position by 50, and we're going to duplicate this. You can press Control D, or you can right click and click duplicate, and we're going to have this one in the front. So we're going to have this one as +50, and they can just stay in the air. They don't necessarily have to be in the ground. So now that we have these 3 blocks, what do we do with the actual lighting features? Now, when it comes to the lighting in native Gdevelop, not Pandaco's extension, which we're going to use in a different tutorial, but native Gdevelop lighting is only from layers, which can be very limiting, but it still has its uses. Now, if I go into this base layer, as you can see, that's the only layer we have. Every object in Gdevelop is on a layer. If I click into this object, you'll see over here on the left side is base layer. And that's the layer that's on. And if I go into my layer, you'll see these different properties, but the one we're interested in is edit effects. And as you can see, Gdevelop has added 3D effects. You can see add 3D effects, add 2D effects. From my knowledge, 2D effects will not work correctly on 3D objects. You can test them out to see, but there's really no need to add 2D effects. They're not for that. And 3D effects, right now, the only 3D effects that we have are lighting effects. Those are the only ones that we have. Now, you'll see when we go into our lighting, we have ambient light, we have directional light, fog, which is exponentially growing, and then we have linearly growing fog, and then hemispheric light. So we're going to go through all of these different lightings and compare the differences between them. Now, this light color, you'll see if I click ambient light, which is our first light here, it is a light that illuminates all objects from every direction. Now, think about the sun in real life. Of course, the sun is in a certain position, and you can tell what the sun is shining at by the direction of the shadow, and of course, what is the brightest part of the object. When you use ambient light, that means everything is equally lit up. Every side is equally lit. And we have two parameters, an object that we can, we have two values that we can change. We have the light color, and then we have the intensity, which is how bright it is. Now let's apply this. Now before we actually apply this, you'll see that if I go into my objects, they have no lighting effect. That means they will not react to light. And we're not going to let them react to light yet. I'm going to preview you how it looks when there's no light. Well, when there is no lighting effect added. And you see that it looks exactly how it looks in the preview. This looks exactly the same as it would look in the preview. But now let's go into our object and go into our material type and put react to light. So go to the red cube, go to the ground, put react to lights, and then last but not least go to the block and put react to lights. Now that these will all react to the light, so you have to make sure this is checked off or else it won't work. Now as you can see, nothing really has changed, and that's because ambient light, it can make it quite hard to see changes with ambient light because it's covering all the, it's equally lighting up every side. So we can see a change. Let's change the lighting color, because if the light color, let's change it to red and see how it looks. If I change to red, you can see it made everything dark, because basically adding a color value to the scene. You see the only thing that's still red is the red cube here. Now if I add it to a more neutral color, it's important not to use hard colors. When you're using lighting colors, you want to use colors that are closer to whitish or gray, because the harder the color is, like if I were to use a direct black or direct yellow or direct blue, you're not gonna really be able to tell like what's really happening. So let's use like a light yellow and see the effect of it, a really light yellow. And let's see the effect. You'll see it has a weirder effect because, like I said, it's adding color values. If you've ever played around with like an RGB wheel or something, or the mathematical values of numbers when it comes to colors, adding colors is it does not work out as you expect. That's why using this type of light is really only useful for like white lights. If let's say I use this type of light, I use a white light. Right now I'm using a white light. And let me go into the intensity. So we're going to use a direct white light, and we're going to make the intensity go up. Of course, the higher the intensity, the brighter the light is. So let's change this intensity to 3 and see what happens. Now that the intensity is 3, you can see everything just kind of took on a brighter shade. Like this is brighter than it was in the scene view, clearly, as you can see. So this is actually working. The lighting actually works. And if I make it even brighter, I can go to like 5 or 10. Let's add like 10. It's probably going to be extremely bright. Everything might look white or black. Oh, it looks super bright. As you can see, the ground just straight up looks light blue. The colors just straight up look light blue. And that's just a basic lighting effect. Now you'll realize that this lighting effect is not too appealing because it colors everything. So it's really not true lighting. You can almost not even tell that there's a light there because every light is just, every side is lit up. So let's move into our next light, which is directional light. And our directional light, of course, is just what it says. It's a directional light. And from the description, it says a very far light source like the sun. So basically the directional light is like the sun. It's a ray of light that's shining onto a certain direction. Now we have several parameters. We have 3D world top, and the world top, I'm actually not too sure. You can experiment with that, but I'm pretty sure that it sets where like the top of the world is. So this is like y minus, and then you have z minus, and we're going to actually test this out to see if we find any changes. Now we have the light color, of course. For now, we're going to keep it white because white is generally a good color that works when it comes to these lights. We have the elevation, which is how high high up it is, and we're going to test this out to show some different effects. And then, of course, we have the rotation. Now let's look at this default lighting. We're going to change the intensity to 1, And let's see how this default lighting looks with a directional light. Now, right off the bat, you can already tell a difference. You can tell that the light is kind of shining like in almost, it seems like it's shining to the right. Because you can see the side of this block is completely black, which means the light is not shining from that direction. The side of this block is a little bit more lit up because the light is getting it from that direction. It seems like it's kind of in the front, facing toward the right. It's clearly not from the left. But this gives more of an actual lighting effect to your objects. It gives much more of a lighting effect to your objects. And now let's go into more of the parameters, and let's change the rotation. Now, of course, you can rotate all the way from 360 degrees. Let's change it to 90 degrees and see what happens. If I change it to 90 degrees, you see I've basically kind of reversed the lighting effect. You'll see that now this block on the right, its side is like completely black, which means the light is not really reaching that area. And this gives more of, like I said, a realistic lighting effect. And let's go into more of our parameters here. We're going to change the elevation, which is how high up it is. We're going to change the elevation to 0, which means it's right on the floor. And you're going to see exactly what happens. Since the light is on the floor, as you can see, it's completely made like the ground black. It's made almost everything black because the light is now under like the floor. So the objects are getting much less light. But if I change it to its maximum height, which is 90, it's going to be like probably more dimly lit. Yeah, much more dimly lit. Like, it's so dimly lit that Gdevelop just registers as black because the light is really, really, really high up. The green seems to still be fine for some reason. But like I said, it's the elevation and the height. Now, moving on, we have the fog. We're going to try to get these done quickly. They're not that complicated. So we have fog. And fog is fog. It's literally what it is. It's fog. As you can see, like if you were to go outside, it's fog and everything. And you can't really tell the effects of what's happening right now. But you do see that everything looks foggy. But this is not accurate. In order for us to actually look at fog and tell what it does, we need to program some type of movement. So let's go into our untitled scene events. Let's go into this. And let's program a few camera controls just so we can move around a little bit. I'm only going to program 2 controls, which is moving forward and backwards for now. And we're going to go into other conditions. We're going to go into 3D. And then camera Z position, which means now we're controlling the forward and backward movement. So we're going to put camera Z position. Well, we don't want to put this in conditions. We want to go into our conditions, click other conditions, go into the keyboard, and go into key press. Now the key press, we're going to just use the up arrow key because we want to use that to move forward. I'm going to copy this and paste it. Instead of putting up key for the second event for going backwards, we want to have the down key. Now let's go into our actions for the up key, and we're going to go into other actions, 3D, and then the camera Z position. And we're going to put add, and the value we want to add is 5 because the camera Z position moves very slowly, so I'm putting 5 every frame. Base layer, that's the only layer we have, and then the camera number, we only have one camera, so it's going to be 0. And if I click preview, if I click the up arrow, it actually goes backwards. So that means we need to subtract. So we need to subtract this. Let's copy and paste it. And for the down arrow key, instead of subtracting, we want to add. Now let's go preview this. Now you'll see if I go far away, nothing has changed. I can basically not even see it at this point. The farther I go away, the less I can actually tell what it is. So basically I can just see whiteness. I can see that. I can tell that they're objects, but I don't know the color of them. I have no idea how they look. Any details part of them. But if I go closer, you'll see more and more details getting added. If I go really close, the one thing that you don't see is color. And that's because there's no mixing like of any light. Fog naturally gets rid of all the lighting, so it makes everything dark. So how do we like add fog and also keep the color of objects? The way we do this is by adding another effect. As you know, you can mix effects. So I'm going to add another 3D effect, and the one on top, well, this one right here, we're going to make it an ambient light, and it's just going to color the whole scene and everything. So now if I preview, you'll see that these objects actually have color now. So although I have a foggy effect, the objects also have color, because having fog without color, even though you may be trying to capture that effect, not everyone wants that effect. So now you can have fog and color in your scene. Let's get through these last ones. Now, if we get into our next one, we have our next one right here. Let's delete this. Well, actually, that's not deleted. We have a linear fog. And linear fog, I'm not going to get much into it. It's just a different way of showing the fog. Now, you'll see these parameters. You'll see distance where the fog is fully opaque and the distance where the fog starts. So, basically, that kind of just controls how close you need to be in order for the fog to start. And it's just more set up that way. So, if I go backwards, you'll see that's like the fog starting at that like a distance of like I think 2000. Everything is fully opaque at 2000. See, everything is fully opaque now. Everything is completely white at 2000. And when I come closer, like that's when the fog actually kind of like starts. It's honestly kind of inaccurate, the naming there, because it seems like that's when the fog stops. But that's basically fog, linear and exponential. I personally like exponential more than linear, but if you want to set up if you want to have more control over your fog, you can make it exponential or linear. And also, one thing I forgot to add, you can change the density of the fog. Like if I make this density a higher number, and you have to make sure you keep it small, or else you'll see what happens when you make it big. This is what happens when I make it big. When I make the number bigger, you have to become extremely close to an object in order to see the color, because the density is high. And you can imagine if you set the density to anything that's basically over 0.001, it's super hard to see at that point. It's extremely hard to even like see the object ever. So in general, keep your density small, like this. Keep your density a small number so you can actually see. Now, we have a few more to go through. And this one is a hemisphere light. So I'm going to delete this ambient light so we can test it. And this is a hemisphere light. And it's a light that illumines the objects from every direction with a gradient. Now, this is not like the ambient light. Ambient light has no gradient. It just simply lights up the scene. That's all that ambient light does. What hemisphere light does, it actually has a gradient. And as you see, that's why we have that ground color. We have the sky color. We have the intensity. And let's just go test some of these. Now, let's see how the default hemispheric light looks. You can see everything kind of looks darker right now. And let's go to our scene again, or our layers again. And let's change the ground color to be lighter. And let's see what happens. We change the ground color to be completely white, and we update the scene. And let's see what happens. Well, let me X out of it so you can see kind of what's happening. As you can see, that really didn't change anything. From my testing, from what I've done, ground color doesn't change much. I know it changes something, but what it changes has not been like, I've not seen the effects. So I changed to red, and let's see if we can see anything. Still don't see anything. So ground color doesn't change that much. But how about we go into our sky color? If we change our sky color, that's going to change more. So let's change it to this kind of pinkish. And you'll see that kind of gives it a kind of more of a lighting effect. It doesn't change much. I guess only a few colors actually bring a different effect to the lighting. Like if I make this, the darker my color is, the darker like the lighting is, the less light is coming out. That's why I said Pandocle's one that we're going to cover in another tutorial is much better in terms of lighting, because this is at the moment is very limited. Now, that concludes all of our lights. Now, what do we do? Like, how do we make this more interactive? How can we make lighting more interactive? Now, you can make your lighting interactive in your game by switching layers, because as I said, you cannot really control these parameters with variables, because they're only in layers. They're effects that affect an entire layer. So let's start off with an ambient light. I'm going to show an example of how you can use this in a game. Now, I'm going to add another layer, and this layer is going to be called the fog layer. And of course, the fog layer is going to have fog. So if I go into this fog layer and go into the 3D effects, I'm going to go into my 3D light effect, put the exponential fog, and we're going to keep it default. Now, if I preview the scene, you'll see that nothing is here. You see that nothing is here. It's just a regular game. Now, we want to make it so when we press space, it instantly switches to fog. Because basically, I'm giving you an example of in an event being activated by a condition. You don't have to use a keyboard press. Any condition can activate the event and set off the fog. So I'm giving you a realistic example of how it could be used in a game. Now, in order to do this, we have to switch the layers of all the objects. And in order to be able to quickly do this without doing it in a tedious way that takes really long, we're going to make an object group that includes all the objects. Now, to do this, you want to go to the top right here and go into the 3 cubes where it says Open Object Groups panel. And then in this Open Objects Group panel, you want to add a new group. And we're going to just call this group All. We're just going to call it All because it includes all the objects. And to do this, of course, now you go to Edit All, and you can add all of your objects in here. And hit Apply. Now we want to make it so when we press space, it instantly switches to the fog layer. So add a new event, add condition, and I'm going to go into other conditions. And if space key is pressed, we're going to go to keyboard, key pressed, and then we're going to type in space. And now if space key is pressed, what we want to do is switch to the fog layer. So we go to add an action, we go into object groups, this is the object group All, and now all I have to do is type in layer, define the layer, and change the layer to fog. That's why we created an object group. If we didn't create this object group, we have to create individual conditions for all of these, individual actions for all of the objects, which would take extremely long, and all we have to do is just add an object group. So I'm going to hit OK and preview. And now if I'm looking at the scene, everything looks regular. If I press space, immediately it switches to fog. Switches to the fog layer. And to make it more realistic, you can add in the fog layer, you can add another effect, which is the ambient light, which, like I said, it makes fog much more realistic, so everything still has its color. So if I press space now, it changes to a foggier version of the scene. You'll notice that I can't move my camera. It's because you have to switch your controls now to move on a different layer. That's why I said this version of lighting can be used for your game, but you have to be very careful. It can be very tedious when you're trying to switch to a lot of different types of lighting. If you're only doing a few switches during the game, it's definitely worth it. But that's why we're in another tutorial. We're going to get into more of real 3D lights like spotlights and things like flashlights, things of that manner. So we're going to be back using wit3.js to have better lighting by, of course, the help of Pandaku. So that's going to end it for the lighting tutorial part 1. If you enjoyed this type of content, if you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my new content. Another thing I want to mention is that I have a GitHub where I'm working on a project, and I'll be posting the source code here, the source code for every project that I have. And this is one of them. So make sure you check out my GitHub. The link will be in the description. There's also a project that's being hosted on there that you can contribute to. It's an open source project, which is Minecraft, that you can contribute to right here in Gdevelop. So with that, once again, I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.